Welcome. My name is Michael Washenko. Today we are joined by the talented Nikke. Welcome, Nikke.
Hi, how are you?
Doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm blessed to be in beautiful California during this chaotic time in the world. So I certainly can't be complaining about that.
So tell us a little bit about what you do and your projects.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, I honestly do a little bit of everything. So I founded a company a few months ago called Not Applicable Concepts. And underneath that, I kind of have a few different businesses. So the main one being Paradigm Art Space, which is essentially a ghost gallery. If you're not familiar with the term ghost gallery, just don't have a permanent space at the moment. So essentially the idea and the goal behind it is to do different pop-up events and give artists a space, especially young and upcoming artists, the ability to be able to show their work without having to like invest a ton of money or go through the entire process of getting into a gallery. I've curated a show that's going to be launching in New York as soon as I'm able to launch it in New York. So focusing on that as well as taking a lot of clients international. So I do curation, I manage clients. I refer to myself more as an agent, maybe kind of a, I don't know. I love the show Californication. So maybe I'm attached to the agent title from that a little bit, but so manage a number of clients, and then definitely deal art as well. And a lot of times people ask me if I myself am an artist. I really do prefer to refer to myself as a writer more than anything kind of in that capacity. But I mean, art's so subjective. It really depends. And then I do have a vintage piece to my business as well. So there's a lot of moving parts going on. But at the end of the day, in my mind, it's all art and it all connects. So that's kind of it, the gist of it in a nutshell, I can say.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously have a lot going on. It's really sounds quite busy. Let's.
Yes, it's very hectic, especially because I'm kind of a one-woman show at the moment. I'm very grateful to have a really great support system and awesome mentors and friends that help out and a great team of artists. But yes, very much at those initial stages. So very busy, very busy.
I'm sure. Let's go back a little bit. I want to learn a little bit more about you. So
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
did your interest in art start? Let's go back. We'll cover briefly kind of the beginnings here.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Honestly, it's almost a hard question to answer in a sense. It definitely came about, I would say, when I was maybe 12, 13 years old. And I think a lot of it actually stemmed from an initial interest in the club kid generation that happened in New York in the 1980s and 90s. With like Michael Alec and James St. James and some of the stuff that they were doing. And from there, I kind of got catapulted into, growing up, looking up to people like Andy Warhol and Kurt Cobain and, a lot of people that really took such a different approach to art. Marilyn Monroe, things like that, individuals like that, I should say. So, I spent a great deal of my teenage years and even my early 20s really, really looking up to a lot of those people. And I'm naturally, I think, because of having so many of those influences and so many of those idols, I've fallen into just being around creatives for a really, really long time, whether I was personally creating or not. So that was kind of where it started. I guess to put it kind of simply, for me, it really starts and ends with Warhol at the end of the day. He's definitely my biggest inspiration when it comes to art.
That's really fascinating. I mean, not a lot of 14-year-olds are obsessed with Warhol.
Yeah, I know. I'm definitely an odd one.
So then, did you drift away from art for a little while?
I did, yeah. So, I mean, I think as we all do, everyone has a lot of different passions. And one of my other passions is psychology. So, coming out of high school, I was I'm very grateful to be part Native. And so I had the privilege of, being able to go to college, did that. So I went to school for social work, and still have a very, very, big drive towards wanting to further educate in the field of psychology as well. And after that, moved to Toronto. Toronto is, kind of a wild city. There's a lot going on there. And it's also, Toronto's very corporate. So I fell into the corporate world for a while. And as much as it might have not been necessarily the best thing suited to me, I learned so much about business from it. So it started where, I was doing a lot of promotional modeling and brand ambassador work. And then I got headhunted to be a headhunter, and then headhunted to be a headhunter at another company. I did a lot of work in events, and like office management and that kind of thing. So that really gave me a lot of the business background that I think has made it, and marketing background that I think has made it, necessary, but also kind of helped to propel my career forward in this aspect as well. I mean, obviously as an agent, as much as you need to understand art, you need to understand the business side of things as well.
For sure. Were you born in Toronto, or where were you born?
Fun fact, I was born in a town that like technically, I can speak, no longer exists. I was born in Medley, Alberta. So I was actually like a military brat. Both of my parents, my mom was military, my dad was Air Force. So I grew up in Medley until I was about 6. I spent 10 years in Victoria, BC, which is another, I think, which has really made a lot of who I am. People have always kind of gotten that West Coast vibe, and that's also probably why, I ran away to LA at this chaotic time. Just kind of feels closer to home, I suppose. So I spent about 10 years there, and that actually, living in Victoria is definitely something that I think really contributed to my creative mindset and a love for kind of some of the type of art that I'm working with now, which I can speak about later. But I was in Victoria, BC for about 10 years, and then came to Ontario about midway through high school, and lived in a couple other places, and then I've been in Toronto for the last 8 years. So I definitely have a good sense of Canada, that's for sure.
Thank you. What was it's one thing to go from loving art to starting your own art business and kind of taking that on a career. Can you talk a little bit about what inspired that transition? What inspired the entrepreneurship angle of that?
Absolutely. I think a really big part of it came from, so I worked for a couple of different headhunting firms, both of which the first one was really small. We never really had more than 10 employees. So it kind of had a bit of a startup mentality. And then the second company I worked for, I was actually employee number 1 to my manager, and we opened up an office in Toronto. So I kind of had that like a bit of a background with experience in startup and entrepreneurship, and kind of doing some consulting, and having to have that entrepreneurial mindset. And I've always been really independent, so it kind of came naturally to that extent as well. But I really found myself in the last year or so knowing that I needed a change of direction. And so last fall, I left the corporate world, really wanting to do some traveling and that sort of thing. Went back to my like kind of events-based, I guess, sort of background, so to speak. And it just kind of happened overnight. Like, it wasn't like I woke up one day and I was like, today I'm going to do this. There was kind of this period, I would say, in the last couple of weeks of December where I just, all of a sudden, I found myself working 12 hours a day and completely committed to this project. And the pieces just started to fall together. I got connected with a couple of really, really amazing graffiti artists, and that just opened up the doors to another person, to another person. But if I'm being totally honest, the birth of it all actually started over beers last summer with an artist friend of mine, who was technically my first client. And I was going to help her kind of build up her brand. Life happened. And when I kind of had the opportunity where life slowed down, that was kind of when I really jumped into it.
So this all really, give us a timeline. So you really started this back in summer of 2019?
Yeah. Sorry, I actually glitched on that myself because the real focus started kind of coming in September. But yeah, summer 2019 was the birth of the idea, but it definitely got put on pause, I would say, for a number of months, through in July, August. It was kind of like a lot of ideas were flowing, and September, October, November, December, it was just grind, focus on work. And a lot of other stuff that was going on. And then as soon as the time opened up, I just jumped and kind of delved right into it. And I really haven't looked back. This has been my full-time job for the last few months. And I honestly, there's nothing else in the world I'd rather be doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And actually that is a very quick runtime. That's very compressed actually for someone to start multiple businesses.
Yes, yeah. Like I work. It's funny. I work fast, but I work slow. If that makes sense. I'm always doing a lot, but I mean, obviously, when you're running a company on your own, there's only so many hours in the day. So the to-do list is kind of ever growing, and the priorities are ever changing in that regard. But it's definitely ramped up very quickly. I'm really grateful, as I said, to work with all the artists that I do, to have the mentorship and support that I have as well. And I think that that's allowed me to grow a lot more rapidly. I think that between my business background, my passion for art, and I've, there's obviously like a sense where like there's like some common sense and street smart that come into things, but I've done a lot of research on social media and influencers and the way that stuff works. And I think that's part of the reason that I've been able to propel my business in a sense at the rate that I have, or at least kind of even get someone like yours attention. I think you want to speak a bit later about kind of like advice and keys to things. One of the main things I think for anyone, no matter what you're trying to do, is to learn the Instagram algorithm. If you can do that, it will completely change your career.
So I definitely talk a little bit more about that, and then I have a couple other questions for you. So,
absolutely, yeah. So just about the algorithm in general.
What it is that you feel that you think is like the kind of key knowledge that is like that allows you to have that success?
Absolutely. I think a really, really big thing that has allowed me to have any success, so to speak. I'm definitely very much like still in the stage of like growing pains and learning. That's always going to happen. But I think the biggest things for me is, number one, I really haven't given up. I'm not afraid to ask questions. I think not being afraid to ask questions and being willing to take risks is massive. Like yesterday, I reached out to Art Basel and I was like, hey, how can I get on your virtual gallery? And I just asked the question, right? A lot of people might fear doing something like that, or they might fear reaching out to that artist that has like 1 million followers. And it's like, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no, or they're not going to answer. But if you don't take the chance, you're not going to give yourself the opportunity. And so I think a big piece of it is just being willing to like open conversations with people and kind of, it's like hitting on somebody at a bar. Like, you know what I mean? Are you going to be the person that's going to walk up and say something, or the person that isn't? And, we can apply a lot of things in business as we do to life, where it's all about making connections. And in order to make those connections, we have to ask questions and we have to be open. And then on the other end, I think it's taking a very, very targeted approach. So, I mean, it's not as if I have a massive following. I think between my 3 Instagram accounts, I'm getting pretty close to 5,000 followers between 3 of them over the course of a couple months, which is pretty good in my opinion. I'm not really sure how these things work. I mean, I'm selling art, and I'm not really selling like my modeling career or anything at this point either. So it's not the same as kind of coming in as an influencer, but learning the algorithm, focusing on the algorithm, and really, curating my audience has made a big difference. I remember, one of my biggest moments this year was someone added me on Instagram, and when people add you on Instagram, it has like the little suggested people, and the suggestions were like Artist Project and like Mocha Toronto and like the AGO, and I was like, okay, like if that's who's coming up with me, I know that I'm doing it right. And it was like one of those little moments where it was a really, really big win, just to know that countless hours that I spent following and unfollowing, and, or the weeks I spent being locked out of being able to hardly do anything on Instagram because I got a little bit too eager one day. It's kind of paid off in its sense. And to be honest, like almost my entire roster came from Instagram. I owe so much to that platform, and I'm so grateful for the way that it allows me to connect with artists all over the world. So if I put it into a nutshell, just like drop the fear and take a risk, be willing to say hi and make that first move and open the conversation, and and be passionate about what you're saying. And if you are, I think people are willing to hear it. And on the other side, it's, you have to understand your business and your market. And, you know, in today's day and age, social media is so important to any type of business, especially in the creative world, and especially during a time when we're all stuck in our homes. So, you know, I think that learning that technical piece on top of having that passion and having that drive, and not being afraid, that I'd say those are kind of like my top three things, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And I think that our audience will really appreciate that feedback. And I think the points that you're saying are so valuable, and some stuff that I've been preaching as well, like as part of my company. I think that our missions are aligned there. What are your thoughts on cold emails? Do you believe in them, or is it all Instagram?
And what, sorry? Do you mind just repeating that? I kind of missed that.
Like, what are your thoughts on cold emails? Do you think that Instagram is better or email is better? Or like, would you just stick to Instagram, or how?
So I think it really, really depends, because for me, I've had a lot of success when it comes to actually like direct messaging with people on Instagram. But I think, again, then it takes like knowing your audience, right? I've been able to connect with really high level individuals at art galleries through Instagram. But if I sent that message and it fell on deaf ears and I didn't hear back from them, then I would definitely send a cold email. I think that in a weird way, Instagram has become more convenient, even for myself. I answer a DM before I answer an email. Emails are kind of like, you can kind of do the Instagram thing on the go, whereas like I find emails are, they're almost more time consuming. You want to sit down at your laptop, you want to think about it a little bit more. And I think especially in the art world, and just with today's generation, we are able to be a little bit more casual, where, you know, with one of my kind of big business moves, and you know, even how I think we in a sense connected, has kind of been like, everyone's on the internet right now. And, you know, you can kind of just send out a message and be like, hey, I'm not really sure what you're up to right now, but I'd really love to collaborate once the world gets going again. Like, there's kind of different approaches that we can take, I think, especially because like at least 50% of our society is living on social media right now. So I think it's also a timing thing, and then also knowing, right? Like, if you're reaching out to a really, really high level gallery, you're going to want to probably send them an email, and you're going to want to make sure that your pitch and your deck and your portfolio and those things are attached to that. But if you're reaching out to an artist and their business is on Instagram and that's what they do, you're going to be a lot more likely to connect. And then you're also like more so approaching someone in a casual and personable way, where it's like, let's collaborate, not, hey, I want to make money off of you, if that makes sense. And, you know, you and I kind of spoke about this like previously as well, where, you know, not being a money driven individual, having a more casual approach, I think is very important to me in particular. And that's part of the reason why I do as much as I can through Instagram, because I think it allows things to be more personal and more casual in a way.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I wanted to talk to someone else who has that background about that perspective, because that's something that I'm feeling as in my personal experience as well, working with people. What is something that you wish that you had known when you had started?
I wish that I knew that I should not. Oh goodness. So I had a pop-up, and I've already had one art show as well. And you know, I think everyone's first shows probably don't go as well as they want them to. And you know, I think I wish that walking into those shows, I had the lessons that I learned walking out of them. And that's kind of a strange thing to say, because I think we can always say that. But at the same time, without those experiences, I wouldn't have been able to grow, and I wouldn't be so excited about the show I've created and the show I've curated that I'm really planning on taking international this year. I think that I just wish that I would have known maybe how much negativity I had to prepare myself for, in a sense, because there's a lot of in any industry, right? Like when we're talking about creative, entertainment, anything like that, you know, there's a lot of ego, there's a lot of rejection, there's a lot of disappointment. You know, everyone's gonna have a show that no one shows up at, whether you're a musician or an artist. These things happen, and I guess I never thought it was gonna be me. And I remember sitting there after, my second show, and it just didn't go as well as I wanted it to. And it was my mom, actually. It was really funny. My show was very much inspired by Hunter S. Thompson. And, I've looked up to Warhol for a really long time. And my mom was like, you know what? I bet Hunter and Warhol cried after their first show too. But yeah, I think I just wish I would have been more prepared, I think, for some of the disappointment.
Sure. That's wonderful advice. When was your first show? So we have a little bit of a timeline here.
So I did my first pop-up I did on January 25th. It was very small. It was just like a few artists, like one rack of it.
Or LA?
Pardon?
What city?
So I did that in Toronto at Sandbox Studios. And then my second show I did on Leap Year on February 29th. And that was with Impact Kitchen. I essentially rented out the upstairs of their space. So I've definitely taken a bit of an interesting approach in terms of like choice of venue and stuff like that. And that's actually more of an inspiration, I would say, from the club kids than anything else. Is like, hey, let's take this space that shouldn't be this and make it this. And so then I did that show on the 29th of February. So that's kind of where we're at. The plan, and from here, is to hopefully do a show a month. With everything going on, my show in New York's been pushed. But my next show is going to be at SOMMwhere Gallery, which is on the Lower East Side in Manhattan. And then I do have another one planned in Art Bar LA as well, which is pretty exciting. So we definitely have some more exciting things on the horizon. Started out in Toronto and kind of did those two initially.
For sure. What would you say is the most useful tool that you use?
The most useful tool? Oh my goodness, breathing. Taking a minute to breathe, and also iced lattes. Is that a tool, or iced latte is a tool? Because I think that if I didn't have them, I couldn't do anything else. So definitely those. But the most useful tool, notes. Just so many notes and so many photos. I have a million notes in my phone. I always have a notebook with me. I think, I'm constantly seeking feedback from other people and trying to collaborate with everybody that I can. And also just like, again, coming back to that lack of fear. Like, one of the most useful tools I have is not being afraid to reach out. You know what I mean? Even this morning, like, I had a moment where, that the world's a little grim right now and it can get to us all, but like having that tool and of not being afraid of reaching out, I can have a phone call with my mentor and like jump back at it, or reach out to one of my artists and be like, hey, how are you doing today? And just making connections. I think the best tool is really communication and just making connections with people, because that's what propels us forward, keeps us going, and really allows us to grow and learn, especially as creatives. We need to sometimes like brainstorm off each other or kind of bounce ideas and that sort of thing.
For sure. I mean, where would you say that strength comes from? And what advice would you give to someone who is trying to find that strength?
In terms of like communication and kind of just like not being afraid.
That fear.
The fear bit. So I think a lot of that honestly comes from my background in psychology. So I started studying psychology around the same time I started studying art. I was a really weird 12-year-old apparently, or a really cool one. It depends on how you want to look at it. But I think the lack of fear is just, I think it's just kind of a perspective that I take to life in general. And it's about really just kind of like taking your guard down, and not taking your guard down in terms of like not reserving yourself or not protecting yourself, but knowing what you want. And just with art, if you don't remove that level of fear and you don't allow yourself to be passionate and believe in yourself, you're definitely not going to make it, because there's a million other people who want to do the same thing. The difference between you and everyone else is, are you going to ask the question? Are you going to walk up to the person? Are you going to post that thing? Are you going to take that chance. And, you know, it comes in, it doesn't even necessarily always have to be a belief in yourself, because I think sometimes it can be harder to believe in ourselves than our own ideas. But I think if you really believe in your idea and you really believe that you're able to do something that's going to make an impact, that stuff starts to shed away a little more naturally. And I think that when we do become consumed with fear, and, you know, I think that's something everyone in the world is struggling with in a lot of different ways right now. It's, okay, what do I need to hear that's going to take that negative thought away? Is it going to be self-talk? Do I need someone else to say it to me? You know, one of my greatest inspirations and kind of things of overcoming fear throughout this time has actually been an artist of mine in Italy, who's just had the most positive mindset. And I'm like, if he's not afraid, how can I be afraid? And so I take a lot of my inspiration and lack of fear from the people around me. You know, I owe everything. I owe everything to every artist that's interacted with me, or, you know, every piece of art that I've seen in the last while. Like, every time I have one of those moments where someone inspires me, it strips it away. And I'm really inspired by music in a lot of ways as well. And, you know, there's been particularly in the last few years, like, an individual that's been a massive inspiration to me was Lil Peep. And that's just like the definition of no fear to me, to like come out and create a whole new genre of music, be exactly who you are. And so I definitely draw a lot of inspiration from different types of artwork and different styles of art and different styles of music and creativity. So there's kind of a lot to it. I don't know if I'm not sure if I answered that like as directly as you might have wanted, but it's kind of tough to answer, because a piece of it is outside of myself, and then another piece of it is very much like research and psychology, and also just, I guess, my own independence and genuine passion and belief for what I'm doing.
I mean, that is really powerful, and I appreciate you sharing that. I know that you mentioned there that things are kind of happening a little bit right now. I'm not going to mention it by name because this video will get demonetized.
Yes, that's totally fine.
But I think everyone knows that there's a little bit of a pandemic happening right now across the world. I know that there's a real human tragedy to this, but have you been able to find a silver lining to this?
Oh, absolutely. I've found so many. So you're definitely gonna see a lot more of my personal art, so to speak, throughout the rest of the year, particularly in relation to this. So, you know, I kind of made the wild move of coming out to LA. You know, I came out to LA kind of at the last minute before I wasn't going to be able to. I am kind of a dual citizen in a sense, so I kind of had the option whether I wanted to be in the US or Canada. And, you know, art just makes a little more sense out here. The sun shines beautiful. But some of the silver linings for me have been clouds, for one. Clouds and palm trees, like, those haven't gone anywhere. The sun for a walk outside, seeing families spending time together, opening up my Instagram feed and seeing all these creatives band together, famous people doing free shows, like art galleries opening their doors virtually just to keep people inspired. Like, there's so much togetherness and unity that we're seeing in the world right now. And, you know, I think one of the hard things for me has been that I feel that I'm maintaining such a positive mindset, and I wish that I could feed this energy to everybody, because to me, you know, yeah, of course there's dark stuff going on, but we can look at that and know that we don't have control over it, or we can look at what we do have control over. And some of the silver lining for that, I think, especially in the creative world, is like, we have time. Like, you know, I have artists that work 9-to-5 jobs that, you know, sometimes they don't have the time to create. And they're sitting at home painting all day, and they're happier than they've ever been. And so I think it gives a lot of people time for their passions, right? Like, it's really about it's about the perspective that you choose to take at the end of the day, because there's so many silver linings, and even just peace and quiet. Like, I'm in Santa Monica right now, and it's empty. It's beautiful. I love it. I'm so inspired.
Are the beaches open there? I know the beaches in Miami. I live in Miami. Beach is always closed here. Can you go to the beach there?
No, you cannot. You cannot actually go on to the beach, but we are still allowed to. You can still go for walks and things like that. I mean, it's a little eerie to see the 3rd Street Promenade empty, but it's also like one of the coolest things in the world at the same time. I think you get to see the world in a different way. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, okay. So kind of building off of that question, I know that your plans kind of got interrupted a little bit by this. What are you?
Yes, ever so slightly.
Yeah, just the whole art world shut down.
It did to an extent, yes.
What are you doing to make so that when things return to a state of normalcy, you're going to hit the ground running instead of walking?
Well, for starters, if you haven't seen my Instagram feed in the last week, like it's looking great in my opinion. So I'm definitely a lot more focused, and I've actually been able to catch up because so much of the world is shut off. So, as someone who's starting out a new company and who takes on so much on my own, it's really given me the opportunity to catch up on things. And really, really kind of figure out, okay, how am I going to work with this artist or that artist? And it's actually, I had a beautiful moment today even where, one of my artists is live painting right now on Instagram a piece for my show. So, the people who are involved in my upcoming show in New York are still excited about it and are still working on things. So I think because people are seeing me still going, I've been really consistent in, maintaining a very creative, but also, a very lighthearted kind of Instagram feed, Instagram story. And I think that a lot of the people on my team and the people that work with me, I don't know if I'm inspiring them. I think a lot of them are very much self-inspired. But I really haven't changed the way that I'm functioning in a sense. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm very much respecting the law in California. But at the same time, I'm still going to walk across the street and I'm still going to go get my iced latte so that I can sit down and I can do the work that I need to do. Like my work ethic really hasn't changed. I'm checking in with all my artists really regularly, making sure everyone's okay. And in a sense, we're building deeper connections because we're all going through this together. And because I work with artists internationally, like I have artists in Europe, I have artists in Canada, I have artists in the US. So I'm getting, we're all kind of bringing different things to the table. But honestly, like it's not even really, nothing's changed in terms of how I'm working. So the way that I see it is my show in New York was already ready to go. And now I'm just going to have even more things ready to go so that when New York happens, everything kind of surrounding my business is also going to be ready to launch as well. Whereas those things were initially kind of going to fall after the New York show. Now I kind of have the opportunity for everything to launch all at the same time, like my website and things like that, which is going to be really exciting.
Perfect. I mean, that's you're killing it.
Thank you. I certainly try. I certainly am trying, and I mean, I have to thank really anyone who even interacts with me on a day-to-day basis, whether it be a single message on Instagram or anyone who shares their art that I get to see it. Like that's what drives me. I work with so many incredible people, and they all inspire me every single day. Like, it's funny because everyone always talks about like the starving artist life, and a lot of people ask me if I'm an artist, and I never really know how to answer that. But I'm broker than most of my clients because I love what I'm doing so much, and at the end of the day, it's like it's about community, and it's about creating, and it's about making space, and just making space in the world for art in a way that I don't really feel like it's existed as much in a long time. At least in the way that initially inspired me, which is kind of a very Warhol approach where we're not just doing one thing. We can do everything, and we can do things our own way. And we can collab, we can mix styles, and we can, I think you know what I mean. I can go on, but I think you know what I mean.
I completely understand that. Just to talk a little bit about my high horse. So I coach artists and institutions, everything. And the first lesson I teach everyone is that gratitude really is the answer. And there's like a direct correlation between how much you're kicking butt and how much gratitude you have. And you're doing both, and it shows. like, cause that motivation comes from within you, and you're rocking it. And
Thank
so,
you. You're so, so kind. Honestly, it really means the world just to have someone appreciate and be interested in what I'm doing. You know, I know how hard I work. I don't know, and that's the thing. It doesn't really even matter if anyone else does, but it's really cool to have someone like yourself and to start have people really be interested in what I'm doing, because you know there's kind of two, I guess, greater goals in terms of what I want to accomplish this year. And one being to open my own factory style space. Again, kind of going back to that Warhol inspiration, but I also really want to start my own foundation as well. So there's definitely always going to be a charity piece to a lot of what I'm doing. And that kind of brings in like that psychology background. So, you know, being grateful for people not just caring about the art, but caring about the causes that I kind of want to associate to things. And, you know, I don't only want to help artists grow, but I also want to help artists be happier and give them the tools and the support that they need to be able to excel. We live in, you know, such a generation where we have things like the 27 Club, or we have like most of my idols, you know, I've never had the opportunity to meet them. You know, I go visit Andy Warhol once a year, but he sure doesn't know I'm there. And, you know, a big thing for me is wanting to kind of move away from that idea that people have to be gone in order to be appreciated. So that's why I also work with like a lot of like upcoming artists, but I really focus and treat them as if they're already established. Because I think no matter who you are, you deserve to be treated like gold. That's just, I guess that's the type of person that I am.
for sure. And you brought up some amazing points. I definitely want to ask you about the future, because you have a lot of exciting plans, and I want to dive into them. But I want to touch on just briefly. Let's say that I am an artist. Let's say I'm a painter. I've been making work for a few years. Um, what would I need to do to kind of get represented by you, or to get collaborate with you? What would I need to show, and what would I need to do?
Honestly, I mean, the first thing is just starting the conversation, right? So I actually did an open call for my New York show. And I did bring on a few artists from that open call, which was really, really cool. And those are some of the people that are actually the most committed to the show as well, which it has been really, really cool to see. So, you know, I'm always open to people like reaching out if people want to work with me. I try and find ways to fit people in. I do definitely have a bit of a niche in terms of the style of artists that I work with at this point. But I'm always happy to work with people in an individual capacity as well. So, I mean, it's just kind of like I said, in terms of that, like getting rid of that fear and taking a risk, right? Like step one is like, say hello, reach out, show me that you're a person. And beyond that, it really comes down to trust, communication. Do we vibe? Like, am I going to be able to do for you what you really want to accomplish with your work? Like, do our visions align? And all of that starts with a conversation. I definitely like steer towards a lot of people that either come from backgrounds in graffiti or street art, and are kind of leaning towards more contemporary styles. But at the end of the day, it's if an artist is really, really passionate about what they're doing and they're open to the sense of community and they're excited about my idea, I typically can find a way to work them in some capacity. You know, it's at the point where my roster is pretty hefty, and I definitely need to focus a bit more on the show that I obviously have already curated. But I'm always happy to like take people on in other ways. I have certain artists that I just represent internationally. So like I have people that I represent exclusively. I have people that I represent internationally. I have people that I just do print work with. So it's also just about figuring out, what can I do for you? What do you need? Like if someone's been around for a few years, they might have certain things established already and they might not need me for everything. Whereas other people are like, here's my heart and soul, let's go, right? And so it really depends. It really depends. But conversation, like again, communication, trust, passion, like for me, everything comes back to all of that, regardless of kind of what area I'm working in.
Yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense. You're not just working with works of art, you're working with people.
Oh, absolutely. Well, people are works of art, aren't they?
So one more. So let's say that I want to go and kind of start what it is that you're doing. What would be something where, you want to make that leap? You've committed to reaching out to artists and you want to represent them. What would be something that maybe they wouldn't know until they've already done that, or like how would you go about getting your first artist to represent?
Honestly, I would find, so one of the things that I had initially done was I took a leap. I reached out to one of my favorite artists and I was like, hey, are you looking for representation? Like, just a simple question. Like, I have a very, I don't want to give away all my secrets, but again, it's kind of you can do a very simple, hey, I really, really love your work. Have you ever thought about working with someone before? This is what I'm working on. I think that before you do that, though, you need to really, really nail down your concept and your idea. I think one thing that I didn't have walking in that I probably should have had walking in is to have a deck. And a lot of people are like, oh, what's a deck? What does that mean? And if you haven't worked in marketing or business, it might not be something that you're privy to, but it's basically just a presentation. We all know PowerPoint. We all took computer class in the 90s, but it's put your ideas together, whether it's like 5 slides. Like if you follow me on any of my social media, you'll definitely see that my branding is very, very simple. And I take that approach to a lot of things. I do things in a simple way, but I do things in my own way. So know your idea and have it on paper, and have it ready to just kind of like send out to people and be like, hey, this is my show. This is what I want to do. Do you want to be a part of this? Another thing as well is just being like, hey, do you want to meet for coffee? Like, do you want to go grab a drink and just sit down and talk to them? It doesn't have to be always an aggressive approach either. We can always, I think that everyone just wants to be treated as a human. And is anyone really going to turn down a free coffee? You know what I mean? Like, that's how I'm always like, hey, like, you want to go for coffee? Like, let's talk about art. And most artists are pretty open to that, and you can kind of take things from there.
As someone who is collaborating with you right now, one of the things that I have to comment on is the fact that a lot of people in the art world are very, very shy. And so it's so good to hear you talking about fear and reaching out to people, because that's every artist's weakness.
Oh, of course. We're all introverts.
And it's so nice to hear that, because, so sometimes for me, it's like people want to work with me, but then to hop on a free phone call, it's like pulling teeth. Whereas with you, it was like instantly you wanted to reach out to me. We talked like that day, and then now you're getting interviewed. It's like you got what you wanted. You're getting things that you didn't even know that you wanted, honestly.
Yeah, it happens a lot that way.
You made yourself available. And I see that from the other side. I just wanted to share with our viewers that, you are practicing what you're preaching, and this is how it happens.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think that because I do have that psychology background, and because I have spent so much of my time around creatives, I've dated musicians. I've been around artists for a really long time. And it's so funny the amount of times in my life, even before getting into this business, where people are like, are you an artist? Are you an artist? You look like an artist. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I write sometimes. It's definitely always been something very close to me in a sense, but this is really the first time in my life I've really committed to it. But I like to think that I'm a very empathetic person, and I really understand the way that humans work. And so I think that's the other thing too, is if you walk into speaking to an artist or someone who's a bit more shy or introverted, and you compliment them, but you also give them the space to like tell you how they want to communicate. That's something I always say in every first conversation I have with every artist, is like, please let me know how you want to communicate with me. If you want to talk on Instagram, if you want to text, if you want to have calls every day, like, you can choose how much you want to communicate and how little you want or need from me, or how much you want to collaborate. There's some people that are like, can you just sell my art? And they just want to do their own thing, and that's totally cool too. So, I think it's about being open, empathetic, and understanding the type of people you're working with, right? Like, most every artist is in heaven right now. We're all just hanging out in our rooms making art. Like, we do this shit all the time. Now we just like, excuse my language, I hope that doesn't like get you demonetized. I almost got through the whole thing without swearing. You can bleep it out. But you know, it's about understanding people too, right? And I think that's where, although I may have fallen off track from my passion, because I have that background in psychology, business, as well as art, that combination really allows me to be able to connect with people and be able to give them, to make them feel comfortable, right? And give them the opportunity to be like, oh, I didn't even think I could do this with my art, or I didn't even know anyone would appreciate it. And you know, there as much as there's ego in the art world, there's also a lack of ego for a lot of people that deserve to have it. And so it's kind of finding the balance in between all that.
What would you say? So one last question kind of around this, just
Of
to
course.
give advice for artists. So let's say that, you know, you're 22 years old, you've just graduated with your bachelor's in fine art, you're looking for representation. I know for me, like when I first graduated, I was looking for representation. I didn't even know what someone representing me would do.
Yeah.
But I knew that I wanted it because I wanted to get a show in New York. That's really what everyone wanted. So what is it that you can actually offer people, and like, what is it if they're looking for representation, either with you or with someone else, like what should they be looking for, and what can good representation do for them?
Oh goodness, I mean, what can't good representation do for you at the end of the day, right? Like, playing off of the fact that we're kind of speaking to that fear, and we're speaking to the fact that a lot of creatives, you know, may lean towards being towards the shyer side of things. You know, oftentimes people who have creative minds don't necessarily have business minds. And I think that that's one of the biggest benefits that I bring to a lot of my artists, is that I can understand their creative mind, but at the same time, I have that business savviness where I know how to do like a cold email or a cold call, or, you know, I can go to that meeting and I know what to say, or I can put together a presentation or a flyer or whatever it might be. And, you know, I think that, you know, artists are talented in their own way, and a lot of artists really like to focus on their specific craft. And when the business piece comes in, it brings all this fear and all this noise, and, you know, rejection's always also a little easier if you hear it from like the middleman. So I think that, like, in terms of just like maintaining people's confidence level and things like that as well, you know, I think having an agent can help in that aspect. You know, I send my artists like pieces of work I think might inspire them if I know that they're working on a certain series. You know, I think agents, managers, representation, whatever you want to call it, kind of open up the doors for people to do like a lot of different things. You know, a painter, for example, like in the old days would look at their work and be like, okay, so I'm a painter, I'm going to put my work in a gallery. Ooh, and now it's 2020 and I'm like, okay, you're a painter, so let's get your work in a gallery, but let's put it on a t-shirt, let's make prints. Like, we can do so many other things. Or, hey, did you want to do a mural? Or, oh, there's this really cool magazine that I can submit you to, and we can get you like a whole spread about yourself. Like, agents open up other opportunities that artists may not necessarily have the time to look for. And then they also tend to typically like have a skill set that I think might not come naturally to a lot of creative types, or just a skill set that, you know, even if the creative types have, they don't care to use. They don't want to have those business conversations. They want to work on their art, right? Like, I think any artist dreams of, you know, creating full time, and having representation gives you the space to do that, but also gives you that upper edge to be able to like get to that next level, to get your work in that gallery, to get that show. Like, you know, the majority of my artists that I'm showing in New York are not very well established, and they have a show at this really cool new gallery on the Lower East Side. And they wouldn't necessarily have that opportunity if I wasn't putting it together. So, you know, that in itself, I think it speaks leaps and bounds to what having representation can do for you.
Amazing. And thank you so much. I know so many people in our audience here that was just going to really, really appreciate that whole section. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Where do you see, just a couple more questions here. where do you see yourself and your businesses in a year?
Oh wow, well, so there's kind of a couple sides to this, honestly. So I've spoken to psychology piece a little bit. One of my life dreams is to get my PhD in psychology. So within the next year, I do actually definitely plan on starting to work on that as well, which is part of the reason I've been so fast moving with my company. With everything going on in the world, there's kind of been a bit of a delay on things. So I was hoping to open my own like factory style space that fall. I think that's probably going to end up happening next spring at this point, just because I need to be realistic. I think that there's going to be some delays with shows and things like that. There's 5 target cities that I really want to hit with the show I've curated for the year. So I curated a show called Organized Chaos. Mm-hmm. This is actually the first time that name's really going public. I haven't actually released any flyers or anything around it yet. I'm working, hopefully going to be working with a very, very cool charity partner on this, and collaborating with some really cool people. So I've been kind of waiting for all the pieces to kind of settle before, really making a big announcement about the show and that kind of thing. But I do have a show curated called Organized Chaos. So that's going to be launching in New York. From New York, we'll be coming out to LA. And then moving on to that, definitely going to do Berlin, maybe Paris, try and toss Palm Beach in there. And then I definitely want to land in Toronto, which is kind of obviously the home base at the end. And I had a couple not so great shows in Toronto, so let's end the year off with a good one. But hey, I mean, everyone has growing pains in the beginning, and that's the reality of the business. And I think that's another thing to always kind of keep in mind. But yeah, the next year, kill this show. I'm also working, I'm very, very grateful to represent the Broadbent Sisters internationally. So the way that my show's laid out is Organized Chaos is actually a 2-day show. And then day 3 is actually a show called Miracles by the Broadbent Sisters. And I'm representing that show for them as well. So there is kind of another piece to what I'm doing as well. And I do have plans to be working on a few other solo shows with some of my artists who work in a lot of different mediums as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if once we kind of get through the New York show, that the other shows end up becoming 4 or 5-day type shows, just because I think that there might be like other pieces to them, just based on some of the clientele that I'm working with and the nature of like what those people want to do. And I guess that also kind of speaks to a lot of the things we've been talking about in terms of openness. So, I mean, a year from today, I would love the factory doors to be open. I would love to have partners that I can trust so that I can go work on my PhD a little bit here and there. So yeah, kind of a combination of those two things. And a year from now, I definitely would like to have a bit more of a settled home base. I'm definitely planning on spending the next year definitely traveling as much as I can, just because that's kind of the requirement and the goal of what I'm doing, obviously. Like I'm in LA right now, which was a very off-cuff decision. But yeah, so kind of a few different things there. That's so
wonderful. It's so ambitious. Where are you planning on opening up your factory?
I'm still on the fence. There's someone I've mentioned, my mentor a few times in this, and I'm not going to name names or anything on that level at this point, but this person's been really inspirational to me, and there's definitely space for what I want to do in Toronto, and there's definitely some inspiration that I take from other individuals that have done similar things to myself in the city of Toronto. And a part of me wants to open it there, just to kind of honor that. But at the same time, I don't know if Toronto's going to be the best place for me to do it. So there's definitely potential that it does open up in LA or New York as well. It's kind of going to depend on what city I kind of end up vibing with the most after I've spent a little bit of time in each place. But hey, I mean, there's also the potential that we have enough artists and we have enough interest, and I have so many people internationally that we could open up one in Toronto, New York, and LA, or even in Berlin, and do something kind of a little bit more off the cuff. So it's kind of a toss up between those cities right now. I'm not really sure.
That's amazing. One thing which I've never talked about publicly is, so I was really inspired by Andy Warhol's factory back when I was in high school, and I actually like moved out, and I had actually covered like my whole apartment or like my whole space in tinfoil or whatever, and it was like this.
Oh my God.
It was the oven because it got really hot.
I
But
love
it was
that.
yeah, and I had it up for a couple of years, and everything was covered in a couple $100 worth of tinfoil, and it was just this crazy like artist space.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. So it's so funny how that like that connection just happens, and you have these things that inspire you that carry with you forever.
Oh, absolutely. I remember my still current roommate, in a sense, my one of my best friends in the whole wide world, love him to death. I remember in the first few years we met, he actually reached out to 3M because he was trying to find the material that Warhol used to make the silver cloud balloons as a gift for me. It
Really?
turns out they don't make it anymore, or else my house would have been covered in them. But fun fact, if you do go to the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh, there is in fact a silver cloud room. So I highly recommend any Andy Warhol fan taking the time to enjoy that, because it's really quite lovely. And as someone who has a very weird obsession with clouds, the silver and the clouds and that whole concept just mean so much to me, and are something that have always inspired me. I think there's something so freeing about that concept that he made, and even just about like, let's take this grungy warehouse and make it classy and make it shiny, and that was kind of his whole thing. Like, he turned ordinary people into superstars. He saw beauty, and he saw beauty in the things that the rest of the world may not, and he gave people a different perspective. And at the end of the day, that's really what I want to do. I want to change the way that people look at art and look at the world, and make people think and question things.
That's beautiful. What is? It's funny.
Thank you.
My mind is just racing in so many things. So I went right to Aventura Mall, which is one of the biggest malls in America, and there's this giant silver statue of Andy Warhol shopping at the mall.
Oh my gosh, where is that?
In Miami, and he's just there
goodness,
holding designer bags, and I just think like Andy would love that. It's so good. It's so good.
You must show me when I visit, because I'll be there as soon as I can. You know that.
If you scroll down on the page on Instagram, I took a photo of it because I had to share it out. It was amazing.
That's so cool.
So, what is a contemporary artist that is really inspiring you right now?
Ooh, a contemporary, honestly, like a contemporary artist that's really inspiring me, other than people I work with personally, like someone who's outside of my roster.
Oh, I love that.
It's hard because the people that inspire me the most are honestly my clients. And if I actually had to pick, like, it's tough because of the nature of some of the people I work with. So I'm like, as I said, I do work with a lot of people who come from graffiti and street backgrounds. So I don't always want to like be throwing names out there and that sort of thing. So I guess if we want to speak to someone who I think kind of inspired that whole movement, and I actually had a beautiful moment the other day with someone in my hostel who taught me the history of Banksy, who had actually grown up in Bristol. So if there's a contemporary artist that I would say like people would know or people have heard of, that I think I draw a bit of inspiration from, and that I think even a lot of the people I work with may have drawn inspiration from, would probably be somebody of the likes of Banksy. He started he started stenciling, he started spray painting on trains. He was one of the original people that really put himself out there and wasn't afraid to make a statement. And even now continues to do so. Like, who else in the world would shred a painting and make it even more artsy? So maybe that's like a cliche thing for someone to say, but I think based on the style of art that I kind of look towards. People like Banksy, Mr. Brainwash, kind of that like street, like pop art kind of style are definitely where I draw a lot of my inspiration from.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I want to ask one last question, final question of the night. This is something that I want to make space for you. What is one question that you want to ask the audience, or something that you feel like they should know? What is, the final message that you want to leave them with?
Honestly, the biggest thing that I can say is during this chaotic time in the world, just please don't stop seeing the beauty, and please don't stop creating. Like, there is so much beauty that is still here, and there's so much room for us to create and for us to stay positive and for us to come together as a community and as a country, as the world, and make something beautiful out of this. There's so much good. Just don't allow yourself to be blind to that, and never stop creating.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been really wonderful. It's such a pleasure. I'm so grateful you reached out, and it's been so lovely chatting with you.
Where can my audience find you?
You can find me on Instagram in a few different places. My Instagram is handle, so to speak, is Nikke. It's Nikke. X and then concepts. So at Nikke X Concepts is definitely kind of like the house of everything. You can also find me at Paradigm Art Space. And then my vintage, which is launching definitely a lot more slowly, is at T, and then it's vintage, but it's kind of like toned down, so it's VNTG, and then ETC for etc. Initially, I had launched that as Toronto Vintage, etc., but I actually rebranded to Time Vintage within the last couple of days. So you definitely be seeing a lot more of that as well. So you can find me in all those places. I don't really mess around with a lot of other social media, so definitely keep up with me on Instagram, and come to my show in New York.
Yeah, sure. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and take care.